Hello everyone, welcome back to Crafting with Slavie, where we make cards and other crafty things. In today's card video, we're going to be making this awesome shaker card using the Valentine's Day 2021 release from Lawn Fawn, specifically Special Delivery and Scalloped Slimline with hearts in the landscape orientation. I decided I wanted to switch things up with this particular card, and I heat embossed my sentiment first because I wanted to cut it out and also ink blend it to match my background. So I am using the Embossed clear embossing ink from Ranger, and I'm using the super fine detail Ranger embossing powder in white to do my heat embossing. And I'm using the Everyday Sentiment banners from Lawn Fawn to cut it out. I did use two different sizes, one for the sentiment, one for the sub-sentiment. Then I went on to ink blend this inside panel with the hearts in Tattered Rose and Abandoned Coral. I started off by ink blending Tattered Rose all over the panel, and it's a very light color. So I put it all over the place, as heavy as I could get it with my ink blending brush. And then I went around the different corners with the Abandoned Coral. And then I went back over it with Tattered Rose, and using the combination of the two colors, it created a really nice blend for me. And it's much darker than just using Tattered Rose alone. And then I went and I did the same kind of thing with these little hearts that cut out, and I'm just using the letters from the inside of these, so that's all I'm focusing on. I'm going to be able to discard the actual hearts later. Now, if you watched last week's video, which I will link here in the top right hand corner, I used the portrait orientation of the same Scalloped Slimlines. And the reason you want both is not just for the orientation, but they're actually different sizes, which is really great about Lawn Fawn products, is that if you get both of these sets, you actually have the full range of sizes. So the one I used last week is a little bit bigger, and the hearts actually interchange, so you can use one and the other if you prefer the sentiments in a specific heart that way, which is really nice. I ink blended using Barn Door and Festive Berries here for the frame that gets cut out using the Scalloped Slimline. And then I also ink blended my panel, which is going to go in behind here in those same colors. Now, when I was doing the scallop, I ink blended in Barn Door all the way around, and then I just went like from the scallop in to ink blend the Festive Berries, just to give me that nice dimensional color there, because it's not very big. And then similar to the heart panel, I ink blended all over the back panel with the Barn Door, and then went over the edges with the Festive Berries, and then worked Barn Door in again and got a darker, nicer blend of color. So onto the COPIC Coloring. I started off by coloring my critters, and this is my first time coloring this stamp set, so I have to admit I wasn't crazy about how I colored this bird, not with this part. I actually really think this owl is super cute, and it lends itself to a lot of different uses if you combine stamp sets like I do. But I didn't like the way that I colored the top part of his head. So I will have another video out next week, which is going to show you a different outcome. Unfortunately, when I filmed it, I totally didn't film the part with the owl. So, you know, I'll just make another one because that's what I do. But you can see here that I actually blended it as the darkest part coming out from inside of his beak. And I'm not super crazy about the way that that looks. The other thing too is the color combination that I used is the color combination I use on foxes, which is gorgeous. I love it, YR24 and 27, but it was a little bit too yellow, so I went in with the E13 to counterbalance that yellow and bring in a little bit more warmth. And then I did these two birds the same, and I considered doing them in blue to help kind of break up the red and pink of the actual card. However, I knew that I wanted to do the satchels and the little hat in blue, so I chose to do them both in yellow because I wanted to originally do one yellow, one blue, but because I'm distributing the accessories, I didn't want them to kind of blend into each other. So with these birds I am making the light source kind of above and in front of them and blending that way. I colored their beaks all the same. And one thing I want to note about the stamp set and the die set for special delivery is that there is a separate stamp for the beak and a separate die to cut out the beak. So if you wanted to have these little birds holding on to a letter with their beak, you can totally do that. Alternatively, there's also a die in the die set that allows you to just cut directly into the bird. So if you color it the way that I did, you can just cut around the beak so that they can still hold the beak if you choose to do so. I didn't want to do that for this particular card, but I will probably do that in the future. So we'll get to explore that in a little bit. I then went ahead and blended these accessories, if you will. Now, this is my first time using this stamp set, and I have to say I'm not super thrilled with where I chose to put the light on the hat. I think it looks much better if you focus the light source right in the center, so you blend it darker on either side. And I did do that in a future video, so at some point I will come back here and I will link that future video here so you can go ahead and check that out. Now, a fun tip when you've got these little teeny tiny images that you're trying to color, if you're like me and you prefer to die cut all your stuff beforehand because you really hate die cutting, then a craft pick is going to be your best friend. I can't quite get them, I can't hold them down with my nails, so I like to use a craft pick because it is fine enough that I can get around it and move around and do whatever I need to do with the actual image. And yeah. All right, so all of these are colored pretty much the same way, just using either a combination of pink or red for the envelopes, or alternatively my white combination, which of course is C00 and C1. If that is too dark for you, you can always use the lightest color that you have of any gray. I prefer the 00s. And then you can use your colorless blender to kind of move that around. But I like the contrast of a little bit more of a darker shadow. I just think it makes it pop more, makes you really notice that it's white. And then I just took a regular stamping block and I stamped the inside of all of these little letters and notes with cute sentiments from the Stamp and Die set. Now, the ones that I chose are geared towards Valentine's Day. There's XOXO, Happy Heart Day, love you, miss you, that kind of thing. But there's other ones which will be in my next week's video, that are not exactly all about Valentine's Day, which is nice. So as per normal, I adhered my panels down first. I did do the interior panel first because I wanted to make sure that the frame lined up nicely around it. And then I started creating my shaker. Now, so I put all this together and then I had to take it all apart because I forgot to put on my acetate. Don't be me. Remember to put on your acetate, people. So I like to adhere my acetate with a generous amount of wet glue. And I like to use wet glue because I feel like it just sets up really nice with acetate. Acetate is one of those materials that is really difficult to adhere unless you have a really strong adhesive. And I have a love-hate relationship with tape, including score tape. Like, I know it's really strong, but I've definitely had it come apart on me, so I just stick to the wet glue. And then I was actually able to reuse all the pieces that I peeled up with the exception of one. I did do a double layer, And that's to allow for all of the inner workings of the beautiful shaker to just jiggle and jangle in there. Okay, now we talked about how I was just going to use the letters from the inside of these hearts. That's what I'm doing here. They're kind of acting as my mask. I did arrange them how I wanted them. I did have an idea going into this of how I was going to arrange my birds and stuff. So I again used wet glue, and I was very cognizant to make sure that the letters adhered nicely so that they wouldn't lift up and move around and stuff. And then I started filling the spots of my shaker pieces with different colors of sequins. I did use a combination of reds, pinks, some whites, some iridescent, and I really like the look of black, so I did throw in a couple black pieces of sequins as well. And then I also have these cute like gemstones almost. They're a little bit too big, but I don't mind. I just really like the look of them. They're very pretty. And then I went ahead and I put the panel on the top. Now I did go over the inside of the panel with the anti-static powder tool to make sure I removed any leftover adhesive from my foam tape here. And I just did that off camera. So then I started assembling everything before putting it on the card. I have 2 of those flying birds and 1 bird that's kind of got his wings tucked. So the tucked bird is going to sit on kind of the bottom of the card, and the other 2 birds are going to look like they're flying, and they've got their little parcels. So it's almost like the tucked wing dude is the supervisor, and the other guys are the mail carriers. Anybody? Maybe? So I started with adhering my sentiment just to make sure I had it in the perfect place. And I have a lot of little bits and pieces that I want to adhere, and those are always easier to wiggle around once your main sentiment is in place. And then I just started adhering. I did use a combination of my scrapbook adhesives. They're the foam squares. They come in 2 different sizes. There's a 1mm thickness, and then there's about a 0.5 millimeter thickness. And I did use a combination of the 2 to adhere all of the little bits and pieces to the card. There are some bits and pieces that are just flat on the card, and I tried to avoid the acetate as much as possible. I did end up putting a couple things hang over the acetate, and there's a couple of hearts that are actually adhered to the acetate. You can absolutely do that. What you want to watch out for when you're putting all of your bits on is that you're not blocking those little sentiments in the middle of the acetate hearts. And that's what I was focusing on. So that being said, that's the card. I hope you really enjoyed today's video, and if you would like to see more of my Valentine's Day cards, stick to the end. There's going to be a card up for you to watch more content, and I will link to the video that I did that I referenced earlier in this video, the ocean shelfie one that I did using the portrait of the Scalloped Slimline cards as well, so you can check that out if you missed it. And I hope you liked what you saw today. If you did, please go ahead and hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.